All right.
There you go.
Got it. Did it start?
Yes, ma'am.
All right, here we go. Today I'm going to talk to you all about how you can design for impact. All right. So back in 1919, a guy by the name of Ronald Fisher got a new job, and he was hired to work at the Rothamsted Research Center in London to pour through decades worth of agricultural data to try to understand what they could learn from literal decades worth of running experiments. And he went back to his desk, and months of time passed where he was crunching the numbers to see, what can we learn from all of this data that they've been collecting for these literal years. And the conclusion that he came to was something that nobody was actually expecting for him to learn from all of this data. And basically what he found out was that it was garbage. All of the data was garbage and it needed to be thrown in the bin. There was literally nothing that could be learned from that data. And the reason why he couldn't learn anything from that data was because of poor experimental design. And back in the day when he was working, which was more than 100 years ago, there was the concept of having a control in an experiment, but they weren't very commonly used. Sample sizes tended to be very low, and people often wrote poor hypotheses. So what was really unique about Ronald Fisher is that not only was he a biologist and researcher, he was also a statistician. So he took the concept of math and science and research and came up with a way to design effective experiments. And he decided to solve this problem of poor experimental design throughout his field of research by writing a monumental book called The Design of Experiments, where he basically outlined a number of best practices for people to follow, so that way they could end up with data that they could rely on at the end. So you're probably at this point wondering, wait a second, isn't this woman a designer? And isn't this talk called Design for Impact? Why are we learning about experimental stuff and Ronald Fisher? Who is this person? And I'm here to talk to you today about a very specific type of design, which is called conversion design, and the process of how to use conversion design to make meaningful and impactful changes to the products that you have. And conversion design combines three different concepts called, design being one of them, human-centered problem solving for people, science by way of the scientific method and hypothesis testing, and business by way of value creation and transfer. And then at the intersection of these things is where conversion design exists. So it's a very specific type of design. So what we're going to cover today is what is conversion design, since it's, probably a new thing that people haven't necessarily heard of, or if they have, I have a very specific definition for it. So what conversion design is, then we're going to do a high-level overview of the steps in the conversion design process, so you can get an idea of why it exists and how it has evolved from other product design and development processes. And then finally, along the way, as I'm walking through the different phases of the process for you all, I'm going to make sure that you get some really practical tools that you can use so that you can help your team and yourself, obviously, to design better experiments so that you don't have to throw all your data in the bin. Yeah, cool. So are we ready? Let's go ahead and get this party started. So what is conversion design is what we're going to cover first. When people hear the word conversion, they typically conflate it with the idea of sales, right? They say, oh, let's increase conversion, blah, blah, blah. And it's usually how do we make more money, right? But when you look into the root of what conversion actually means, it comes from the Latin word convertere, which means to bend, to alter, to transform. But ultimately, it means to change something, right? So that is the heart. That's the root of the word conversion is to change, transform something. So that's what I mean when I say conversion. And people also tend to misunderstand what is design. Everybody has a different idea of what design is. And design has a high level, but then it also has lots of different subcategories within design. So when I'm talking about design, I'm talking about capital D design, which is not just what something looks like, but it's also, the problem that it's solving, who it's solving that problem for, how it works, and ultimately how it's built, right? Oh, I have one disclaimer before I go any further, because I just heard my dog like grunting over there. I have a German Shepherd mix that is sleeping on a couch next to me, and my partner's probably going to get home with my daughter, with our daughter in like, I don't know, a little bit. So if you hear a dog explode and barking and I have to get up and open the door, please just ignore that that's happening. Okay. So anyways, that's going to happen. Be prepared. So anyways, that's what I'm talking about when I say the word design. And my favorite definition of design is by Jared Spool. He's like a prominent user experience designer and thought leader in the space of, design. And he says that design is the rendering of intent. So conversion design then, when you put these two things together, basically means to create intentional change. So it's the act of bringing form and shape to ideas so that way you can impact how something is, right? But it's not just any change that we want to create when we're engaged in conversion design. It's actually improvements that we want to make. We want to make positive change or improvements, because ultimately at the heart of why we engage in conversion design is to make things better for people and not just different. Because how a lot of product design and development processes work today is you just release something and you hope it's better. Maybe you do some post hoc analyses or whatever to make sure nothing is on fire, but you don't ever really know with too much confidence if you've made something better or worse. So you're probably thinking like, oh, cool. Like, I want to make things better. Like, how do I know if I've made something better, right? So how does conversion design help you make things better? Well, let's look a little bit about how design processes have evolved over the past couple of decades. To help you understand how we've ended up at this point of conversion design. So a typical product design and development process that a lot of companies tend to follow is to discover, design, develop, and launch. Like, this is a very typical approach that many companies employ when they're releasing new things or making changes to their product. Pretty standard. Then you have the conversion rate optimization process, which I think is a great evolution. And it was kind of the start of where we're going, right? Because they took that straight line of step by step by step, and they turned it into an iterative loop, which is a whole other idea. But it's still basically a line that you've turned into a singular circle that just keeps going in one particular direction. And I think that's good. But both of these ways of doing product design and development are based on linear thinking. And linear thinking is something that exists because you can tell that what it is because it's very step by step. It has simple cause and effect relationships. There's one thing that goes after another, after another, after another, right? And then you get a sense of clear progress, right? Because you kind of imagine that you're going, one direction through the entire thing, right? But there's actually a different way of looking at the world, and that is through systems thinking. And systems thinking, you can tell when something is based on systems thinking because it's actually more dynamic, right? It doesn't necessarily only have to go in one direction. It can go in any direction, right? It has a number of different complex relationships, and it has a more realistic view of what progress looks like, right? So the thing about systems thinking is that it allows you to embrace the complexity of the real world. That way you can understand what's actually going on from a big picture perspective. And then when you do A/B testing within the conversion design process, you're able to lean on linear thinking by extracting those simple cause and effect relationships, which means when you go through the conversion design process, you're using both ways of thinking, right? Which helps us learn even more. So at this point, you're probably thinking, oh, Lord Almighty, help us. It's been like 10 or 15 minutes and she's talking about this thing, but we don't even know what it looks like yet. But before I go on, if you're interested in this systems thinking, check out these books. One is called Closing the Loop by Cheryl Kababa by Rosenfeld Media, and the other one is Thinking in Systems by Donella Meadows. Has anybody read these books so far? Who's read any of these books? Nobody's responding. Is anybody out there? Okay, I see some people shaking their heads. Okay, hi. These are really wonderful books. So I encourage you to read some of these to help change your way of thinking if you haven't already read them. All right. Again, you're probably thinking, just show us the process already. For Lord's sake, Almighty, help us all, right? Okay, so the process. Here we go. The first step in the conversion design process. Oh, you read Dan Brown. Thanks, Eddie. That's helpful. I've read a lot of Dan Brown too. He's like candy, brain candy, for your soul. It's wonderful. Very, very good. Anyways, the first step of the conversion design process is the understand phase. And this is comparative to, let's say, the discovery phase in most product design and development processes, where you want to learn as much as you possibly can about your customers, your business, as well as the kind of problems that you're encountering that you could solve to make an impact. The second phase is to hypothesize. Y'all are the test and learn community, so you should love a hypothesis. The third phase is to prioritize, basically figuring out what you should work on in what order based on what you think will have the most impact. Then you go into the creation phase, which is bringing shape and form to these ideas or hypotheses that you're looking to test. Then you're finally engaging in a test. I encourage people mostly to stick to 50-50 split A/B tests in most cases. I'm not saying blanket everybody should do it, but especially for teams that are, just getting used to this way of working, I suggest stick with simple 50-50 A/B split tests, because this is where you actually can learn a lot. Again, this is where we have the cause and effect linear relationships that we can learn from. Then you have the analyze phase, where you take the data that you don't have to throw in the bin and that you can actually learn from to figure out what it is that you should do, which leads you into the last phase, which is the decision-making phase of the conversion design process. And if you blow a little bit of life into it, you can see that the conversion design process is actually working like a machine, and it can go forwards and backwards. So again, sometimes when you're aiming to make things better, it's so common that you accidentally make things worse first, right? So you can go forwards and backwards, or you might need to start again to learn something else before you go back to create something. So you can really cycle through it multiple different ways. But again, because it's based on systems thinking, there is an output of this system, and the output is knowledge. And the knowledge is a flywheel or a reinforcing loop, which makes the process stronger. So I feel like I'm kind of laggy. Can everybody hear me, or is my internet connection the worst? You're all right? Okay, cool. Because everybody looks like, sorry, what was that?
It's great. You're not laggy at all for me.
Okay, cool. Because everybody, I'm looking at your little squares and people are like,
Just,
you know what I mean? Like I'm listening.
you.
Okay, cool. Just making sure. Just want to make sure I was not garbled. Anyways, so knowledge is an output, which then gets reinfused back into the system, reinforcing it, making it stronger, right? So that's why this is a very powerful system. But knowledge is not the only output of conversion design. When you're lucky and when you do it right, which is not very often, less often than most people would think, you actually create some sort of tangible value for the customers by solving one of their problems. And you might be thinking, well, where's this value line going off into like the ether? Like, why is this just going into nothing? Well, that's because it's going into something called the value cycle. So the conversion design system exists and powers the business ecosystem in which it exists, right? And this is where the value cycle comes in. And this is where the business aspect of that fancy little Venn diagram, everybody loves Venn diagrams, came in at the beginning of the talk. So the value cycle is a very common concept within business where, businesses get funded by investors or whatever. They have seed money or whatever. And that's the value and that they give to employees. They have like employee value propositions. They transfer value in ways of benefits, salary, purpose, all that kind of stuff that motivates employees to do tasks, basically. And hopefully these tasks are things that, when completed, drive value for customers. And then customers then reinfuse that value from the task that the employees have created because the business has motivated them to, back into the business, because by way of things like time, attention, or purchasing products or that kind of thing. So basically, it becomes another loop where you create value for customers, and that value then gets retransferred back into the business, again, reinforcing in a positive way the business's ecosystem. When you put it all together, you get something that looks like this. Basically a hot mess of a moving machine. I never said it would be easy, so I'm sorry if your brains are melting down. I hope that I didn't go too fast here. But if you can see where conversion design starts, right at the understand phase, is where the business invests in conversion design as its way of working through the employees. So businesses say, let's work in this way and make sure that employees follow this particular way of working, so that way we know that with some degree of confidence, they are delivering that value back into the business's ecosystem. So that's the big picture, right? Okay, so now what we're gonna do is we are going to dig high level grasp of like what each phase is and give you a couple of tips for each one of the phases. But before I go on, does anybody have any questions? Any thoughts, commentary? Nobody.
You all can ask calls or the TLs or the Zoom. I'm happy to ask for you. Otherwise, we'll let her continue.
Okay. Has anybody else read anything else than Dan Brown? That's the last time on Eddie talking about Dan Brown. And Eddie, I know you've seen this before, so I apologize that you're watching it again. Anyways, so where are we? So now we're going to take a look at high level, the steps within the conversion design process. Conversion design has a very specific way of doing research to ensure that you're having the impact that you aim for. And research starts first by looking at things through the lens of business goals. Your company should be setting up goals, OKRs, things that you need to be aiming to achieve to move the business forward. Once you know what those things are, you're able to then examine the top customer tasks that are likely to impact those business goals. From there, you're able to write research questions about those top customer tasks of like, what are the issues that people have completing these tasks, right? And then from there, you can figure out what research method you should be using to answer those research questions that are related to the top tasks that are likely to impact your business goals. From there, you would get a whole list of actionable insights from doing your research that tie the whole way back up into your business goals. So that way you're setting yourself up to not only solve a customer problem, but to solve a customer problem that is likely to move the business forward in the way that you aim to, right? Or the way that you're being asked to by your organization. So that's the first bit, right? So that's how you do research in the conversion design understand phase. The second phase, hypothesize, fantastic, goes back to Ronald Fisher and his experimental design, right? So one of the things that I'm going to share with you after we're done here is something called the Good Experimental Design Toolkit. And it's basically 4 different templates that I'll share with you as we go along that help you think about your experimental design and document your experiments as you fill them out in a clear and structured way, right? So it's basically like experiment Mad Libs, where you just fill in the blanks, and these templates don't do the thinking for you, but they do prompt you to do the thinking in the correct order. So in this particular one, you have to restate what your null hypothesis is. You have to state what research insight has led you to this hypothesis. Then to make sure that you're actually aiming to solve a customer problem or some other opportunity, you have to write your problem statement. And then you make sure that you document what your alternate hypothesis is, which is challenging the null hypothesis, which is the default belief. of the current state. And then you also write down your prediction. Basically, if you change this thing, what do you expect is going to have happened? And how will you basically measure the success of that thing? So that's the very first template that you fill out. So at this point, once you've thought about what it is you want to experiment on, and you have all kinds of hypotheses that stem from these research insights, then you have to figure out, Lord Almighty, which one do we do first? Because you have so many ideas and it's always very hard to pick which ones. That's why I have developed something called A/B testing buckets, basically, which is a useful way to help you prioritize, but also balance the types and themes by which you're experimenting. So I like to think of them in terms of buckets to make sure I'm not only digging in one particular bucket because that's what I'm most interested in, because customer problems cross an entire gamut of different ideas. So the first bucket of the 4 buckets of A/B test ideas are product foundations. A lot of times companies don't think or find it very difficult to experiment on product foundations, and it is hard, but it is not impossible in many circumstances. Product foundations are things like functionalities, partnerships with different companies or whatever, as well as new features. Oftentimes people just release these things without really understanding what impact is it driving on the business. So that's one particular bucket that you can experiment on. The second one is the bucket that most people dig into because it has one of the lower barriers to entry for testing, things like content and motivation. These are things like showing the right thing at the right time, imagery that's enticing and answers questions that people might have, product descriptions, USPs, as well as making sure that the value proposition really aligns to what people aim to achieve on your product. So that's another bucket. The third bucket is usability and accessibility. Though not as explored as content and motivation, it does have a lower barrier to entry than the last one, which I'm about to tell you. Hey, Jonas, how's it going? Sorry, saw your face pop up there. Anyway, usability and accessibility. This has a slightly higher barrier to entry because sometimes it requires more coding changes and that kind of stuff. But these are things like, making sure that form fields are accessible to everything. Hi. Making sure that form fields are accessible, that typography is highly legible, that the colors are visible to everybody. Just basic stuff about, usability and accessibility. And then finally, the last bucket that is not explored nearly enough, I imagine, is performance and bugs. And oftentimes people don't necessarily engage their engineers or developers to come up with experiment ideas, but they offer a lot of value in coming up with great ideas in this particular bucket. How do you improve performance or reduce illustration hitches? How do you, are there bugs that exist that make things crash that they might recognize and see from their perspective that people in different perspectives might not be able to see? So I think a good way to prioritize is to make sure that you're covering the full gamut of experiment buckets. All right, so there's that. Now we go into the create phase, which is basically bringing shape and form to these ideas that you're looking to test. I have another template for this. Again, as I said already, these templates also exist to form documentation. So again, they force you to think about things in a certain order, but as you think about them, you capture them so that way you can remind yourself of why you made a specific decision, but then that decision can also be shared with other people in the form of good documentation. So in this particular template, we're taking a look at assumptions. So experimentation is impossible. Life in general is impossible without making assumptions about things. And assumptions are basically beliefs that you hold that don't require proof or evidence, hard proof or evidence, right? So most of the time when you're making decisions, we're making them based not necessarily on hard facts or evidence, but things that we believe to be true. And that's fine. Assumptions have their purpose. Then you also have to document what your design decisions are. What colors did you choose? Did they pass accessibility checks? All that kind of stuff. And then development decisions too. I have run experiments where I have accidentally used a new type of code, like new CSS things that have ended up crashing browsers, where if I had not documented, oh, I'm trying this new HTML5/CSS3 thing, blah, blah, blah. People could not learn that from my experiment later had I not documented, this is the code that I wrote to make this happen. Hey, Craig, it's nice to see your square. Can't really see everybody, but it's like how fun. Hello. Craig Sullivan is actually one of the original people who came up with the hypothesis template, which is what these templates have evolved from. So you can thank him and all the other wonderful people like him and Lucas Vermeer, Colin McFarland. Who else, Craig?
There's a load of people, Doug Hall. Yeah, there were a whole load of people that kicked around with various versions of it and used it. I think we discovered in the end that really it's what works for your context, but it's the thinking you put into it, right?
Yep. Exactly. Just taking a moment to like step back and structure your thoughts. So this is an evolution of all the work that other people have done. And I'm going to share it then back to you all for you to kick around and then evolve and figure out what works for you and your organizations and your team. Okay. So development decisions. Again, document all of this stuff. Think about it. Just do that. All right. So the reason why I'm saying to document all of these things is because I have found in my years of experimenting that there are actually far more ways to fail at experimentation than there are to succeed. A lot of experiments end up as insignificant or potentially, okay, bye, Jamie. See ya. So a lot of the time you might be making things worse or not having an impact at all, right? And you have to try to understand, is it the execution of the idea that has failed? And then you can go back and review your experiment documentation to see what other hypotheses you can glean and then maybe test the idea again, but with a different execution. Or is it really the concept or the whole idea behind your experiment that has led it to fail? So now you have the test portion. And in this particular portion, you have an A/B test. Again, I recommend that you stick mainly to simple A/B tests, 50-50 split most of the time. But this is really the secret sauce of the conversion design process, which I'm sure you're all fully on board with, being a test and learn community. Because the testing that we're doing with an A/B test goes beyond the bottom rung of the hierarchy of evidence. Most teams never leave the bottom two stages of the hierarchy of evidence. The first one is expert opinion. The second one is observational studies or basic data analysis. And those things are pretty prevalent and they're, somewhat reliable, but they're not nearly as reliable as a randomized controlled experiment, which is the gold standard of scientific evidence. It's a highly reliable form of scientific evidence. And finally, at the top of the hierarchy of evidence, you have a systematic review or meta-analyses, which takes a look at all of the experiment data, as well as observational studies, expert opinion, and all the statistical analyses, and looks at it and comes with an overarching viewpoint of like, what have we learned from this? And hopefully, when you've walked up the hierarchy of evidence by engaging in conversion design, you'll have hopefully been able to learn what is the thing that drives value for your customers, right? So as you learn, you go higher up the hierarchy of evidence to hopefully find your way to delivering value for your customers. Finally, you've got the analyze phase. Everybody, I think, in engaging in the conversion design process needs to have a basic foundational amount of data literacy to be able to make good decisions with. And again, this goes back to experimental design. Before you actually test something, you need to think through what are the metrics that you're trying to impact and what is the, what do you aim to achieve? Are you trying to have a superiority test, which means you're aiming to make things better? Are you just hoping to not make things worse and running a non-inferiority test? So this particular template reminds you and has you figure out what are your metrics and your math that you need to do before you actually run your experiment. So that's a very important part of data hygiene, again, to make sure that your experiment doesn't end up with garbage data. Now, finally, you have the decide phase. There's another template for this as well. And this is all about making sure that, you're not just doing whatever or like blindly following numbers and hitting a button if something goes green that you want to go green. You really have to think, again, this is where it comes back to systems thinking. Yes, we can now see cause and effect relationships, but we also need to embrace the complexity of that multiple things might be impacted by the one change that you've made. And that's when you have to think about what is the optimal decision for making as much positive impact for as many stakeholders of the experiment as possible. And this makes you think about all the stakeholders of your company. Maybe you have your customers, your direct customers, but you could also have, let's say, partner organizations or, sellers on your platform. So businesses often have more than one particular stakeholder that they need to consider. And you consider these things by introducing guardrail metrics, by making sure that you do not impact those other stakeholders in a negative way by stating that, again, up front, and then making sure that as you come to your decision moment that you're not, backtracking on your thought process and making a different decision, which also brings us to the third part of this template, which is ethics. And I think we, as an experimentation community in general, can do a lot better job talking about ethics of the things that we do. And this particular part of the template is a moment to pause and think, like, is this the right thing for people? Do I feel proud of the thing that I'm putting into the world? What are my intentions behind running this experiment? Am I sure that it's not misleading, discriminatory, manipulative, excluding people by not being accessible, all that kind of stuff? And then it has a section that says, even if something's not illegal, because sometimes that's like the threshold for people. It's like, oh, I think it's legal. It's like, we got to do better than is it legal, right? Just because something isn't illegal doesn't mean that it's unethical or immoral. So like have a moment to hold space to think about what is the actual impact that this is going to have on people. And then also think about your own biases and the ways that you're incentivized and how that actually might be impacting your decisions that you're making. So, and then finally, at the end of it, I encourage people to like sign their name or like put a tick box to say that I agree that this is an ethical decision and I stand behind the decision that I'm making, blah, 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 because of, like a psychological thing that people want to align with their views of themselves. All right, so let's see here. That's the decide thing. And then after you've gone through the process, you've now infused the knowledge of what you learned from all of that reliable data. But the conversion design process really gets its power only when the majority of people of the organization engage in this way of working. And that's where one of my favorite quotes is up here, that culture eats strategy for breakfast, right? So you can have the best business strategy in the world, but if you don't have people that embrace it and act on it, it's really not going to get you anywhere. And the growth mechanism behind conversion design is something called the compound effect. And that's when many small good decisions combine over a long period of time to have an exponentially positive effect. So imagine that this is a typical backlog that most product teams would have. They don't know what are good decisions or bad decisions, good changes or bad changes, and they just ship them all, right? A lot of times they just ship them all. Got to get these things done, put them out the door. And then you get business results that look something like this, right? And they think, look at all this stuff we've done. That's great, right? However, it's actually not that great, right? But with the conversion design process and the test and analyzing phase, you're able to find the crap decisions that you could have shipped to people. And instead of shipping them, you just throw them in the bin. You say, okay, well, maybe these things actually weren't that good. Let's just toss them, right? And then you end up shipping less. This might be what you end up shipping, So it's a little bit counterintuitive where people think, oh, we've done more. Look at how much we've gotten out. It feels really good. But you're actually having more of a positive impact because your results look more like this when you ship less work, but the work that you ship is actually good as opposed to being a mixture of good and bad. So yeah, there's that. If you're interested in this concept, it's called the compound effect. And there's a great short book by Darren Hardy called The Compound Effect, and you can utilize it in different aspects of your life. So anyways, summary. Well, that's pretty much the end of it. So I'm just going to go through a speed and then we can chat about it if you're interested. So the conversion design process is a dynamic system diagram that, creates knowledge and reinforces the entire system. It combines the concepts of design, business and science. And it exists within the broader ecosystem of businesses to drive growth. And it drives growth because you're able to make decisions using highly reliable forms of evidence. But it's only highly reliable forms of evidence if you do good experimental design, which is why you should use these templates that I'm giving to you. And then once you go through all of this and you make good decisions, you can then strategically throw all of the crap decisions in the bin, just throw them in the garbage. And then you'll end up with results that look more like this, because in the end, you'll be more likely to be making things better and not just different. Because anybody can make things different, but you can make things better. Anyways, if you found any of this even remotely interesting, thanks for hanging in there. Hey, Laura. Sorry, I just saw your little square pop up. I don't know when. Okay, if you found any of this remotely interested, hi. Laura's on my team at work. I have a book coming out sometime in 2024. I should actually probably be doing my illustrations and finishing my editing right now, but I was very excited to come talk to you because I love Kelly. I have just met her today, but she had purple hair and she looked really cool. So I'm very excited to be here with you all today. So yeah, this book will be coming out soon, and it's basically about everything that I told you about today, big picture, but I go deeper into all the different phases and give you practical hands-on advice. And again, if you're interested in any of the things I do a whole bunch of different things. You can check out my website. And that's also, if you join my email list, I never send emails. The only email that I plan to send is to just let people know when I'm actually going to put my book out. So like, come join my email list. I will not send you emails, except for like maybe a few when my book is out. Yeah, that's my sales pitch. Okay, anyways, I know I'm not supposed to do sales pitches. Sorry, Kelly. But anyways.
It's absolutely allowed because we all want this book. I'm very,
okay. Cool, thank you. It's not even, it's like, join my email list. Well, I will not send you emails.
That's right. It's perfect.
Yeah,
awesome.
Cool.
That was great. So awesome. Does anybody have any questions? All right, I have a question. Can we have a copy of that deck? I grabbed screenshots and tried to get the names of books and was like rapidly typing over here. I missed stuff. Is that a question or a wave?
That's a question.
Go for it.
But finish what you were saying, please.
Well, my main question was, can we have a copy of the deck? So that's not a big question. So yes.
Yeah, 100%. I actually need to put it on my website. I've been meaning to do that, but I've been kind of busy doing
No worries. If we can get a copy of the deck, if you want to just plop it in the TLC Calls channel, that's great. Otherwise, you can send it to me and I'll do it. So great. Okay, ask your question.
The 4 buckets of testing. There was accessibility, bugs, and somewhat performance. Like, what's the test? Like, does it need to be tested? How is it tested or just fixed?
Bugs.
Yeah, there was performance and bugs, and there was usability and accessibility. So I think bugs and accessibility specifically, should they be tested, like the fixes, or how do you approach that?
Okay, so I'm a bit of a weirdo because I think we should be testing as much as we possibly can to learn, did we actually solve the problem that we are intending to solve? Because I have pushed bug fixes, or at Booking, we tested everything, even our bug fixes, our accessibility fixes, the legal changes that we needed to make to be compliant in different countries. Everything, literally everything was tested so we could understand, did we actually fix the problem that we were trying to solve? Or what kind of impact was this having on our business, or user experience metrics that we also tracked? So yes, I would say, if possible, test bugs, test accessibility fixes, usability fixes, because it's really possible that as you think you're fixing something, you're actually breaking things, or maybe not fixing it in a way that is actually the best way. And I think from fixing those bugs, you learn some things that you might not realize. Like, one of the things that I learned from testing like legalese stuff, like making sure that on Booking, there was things that you needed to test that added more clarity to what some of the numbers were on the website. And everybody assumed that adding more clarity to that copy to meet legal requirements was going to have a negative impact on conversion. It ended up having a wildly positive impact on conversion. And then we had to dig into, okay, well, that's great. So making sure that things are clear, and legally compliant is actually really good for your user experience and for business goals. How can we dig deeper into that concept and then come up with new hypotheses to add more clarity, and not just for the sake of being legally compliant, but to really help people? So yeah, I would say test everything if you can. I know that from a practical standpoint, that's really not possible for everything, but in the end, I would say try to test as much as possible. Does that answer your question?
Absolutely does. Yeah. Thank you.
Cool. What do you think? Do you have any thoughts on that? Because it's
No, I
that's
thought
an
when you
interesting
said
question.
when you said bugs,
Yes.
I thought, let's say you have broken checkout. You're not gonna
I
test fixing broken checkouts, like things like that.
I think it depends. I think it really depends on the bug and the context and the level of evidence you got. If you look at bugs in the grand scheme of all the things that are potentially testable, then they're probably more likely to succeed than most of the other things that you are testing, right? So quite a lot of bugs will fall into what I call the JFDI category. Just do it, right? Especially if you have multiple triangulated pieces of evidence. You have quant data showing that this is causing a problem, quant interaction data that shows you have a problem. You have screen recordings. You can see people struggling with the field. And if it's a straightforward issue, then for a lot of people, very few people are testing bugs, only those that have huge high traffic. So I think it's a bet, like all experimentation is. It's just a better bet and more likely to have a shift on behavior than the new feature potentially that you're introducing, because you already have evidence that this is a problem and a friction for people. And in some cases, if you remove it, it's just fine. You can also batch these things. So instead of testing individual bugs, you can apply some bugs that are all thematically related and test those together, and that can help too. But not everyone has the capability to A/B test their bugs. It would be nice to know, but sometimes there are alternative forms of evidence.
Yeah, and if your checkout is broken and you're actively suppose somebody rolled something out and the line is going down and customer service calls, just fix that. Don't test it, just fix that. You know what I mean? So not everything blanket.
The biggest bug that I fixed that was worth about it was worth over a million a month, was one where it was high spend, high value jewelry items. The average spend was about 4.5K, and the bug they had on their product page, 60% of which was paid ad traffic, was when you try to move down the page, it would hook the image handler and it would zoom in on the product. So you couldn't actually scroll and use any of the product page, but only on iPhones, right? Now, if you got something like that, I would be just like, oh, should we run a test? No, get it fixed now.
Mary.
Yeah. Cool.
Yeah.
That's a great example.
I just want to point out that as a former developer, I've introduced many bugs by fixing bugs. So I advise.
Thank you. I want to quote you in my book saying that.
That's why we have
Because
QA. If you have a device bug, right, and someone says this fails on this device, you can fix it and then test it before you put the code live. That helps too.
Yes.
Test it, find out what devices your customers have, and make sure you test all your A/B tests and website changes with them, because otherwise you could kill the golden goose, right? If you have 70% iPhones, for example, you should really make sure that all your ads and landing pages and everything that you make works on iPhones. Otherwise, that's a risk and uncertainty you introduce. So find out what people have in their hands when they rock up to your site or product, and make sure you test everything with those devices.
Eddie, is that a hand raise?
Yeah, I would say right now I feel like a lot of tools, instead of having you do an A/B test for bugs, it's do like feature rollout for bugs. So instead of introducing like 50% of your users to either a fix or a bug, you only introduce it to 10% first and then see how it goes from there.
Yeah, I guess there's different ways to do it. I would probably say that would just slow down you getting the sample size that you need to know if you've made it worse. You know what I mean? Unless it's like 10% is a lot and you're able to see very clearly. But yeah, and it really is contextual. So there are some circumstances where it would make sense to maybe like just do a quick 10% sort of check, because if you've really broken something bad, you'll probably be able to see that in the data. But you know, but then, again, you would learn that even faster if you introduce it to 50%. Then you would know faster than if you let it run for a longer time with 10%, if that makes sense.
Yeah,
Another good idea is metric wrappers. So let's say you're working on a postcode lookup UI, right? So you measure the amount of people amount of users who start typing in an address, and then you measure the percentage of them that picked an address, right? And you start out with it and it's 72%, right? Then you make a whole load of changes to improve that. It moves up to 85%, right? You can fix bugs and things like that and use a metric wrapper to detect fairly large changes. You know, they can't be subtle, but you can look for improvement that way instead of doing an A/B test. There are risks with that.
I would say that if you want to fix a bug, then you want the bug fixed live as soon as possible, right? So starting with 10% will slow you down so much, right? You want to start with the most power possible to make the fastest decision possible in that case, right? You might not even wait for the business metrics to show positive results. You might want to do a quick decision just by looking at your guardrails and see if you don't break any of the guardrails. And in that case, okay, let's chip it to 100% now.
Yeah, a big warning to emphasize the 10% thing. A lot of people are scared to launch something, even if it's bug fixing or just an experiment. If you launch something with 10%, you need like at least 1,000 users to see something happening. So it doesn't matter if you launch 10% or 50%, you need to get those users in. And the bad thing about starting at 10% is it leads to, there seems to be no bug, so let's scale up to 20, 30, 40, 50%, which creates the Simpsons paradox potential mismatch in there. So just start at 50% and you need those users to understand if something's happening to see any effect at all.
Yeah, when people do not ramp up, like what Ton was just talking about, because you can unintentionally add bias into your samples by doing that. And there's actually going to be a really great story in my book by a guy who used to work at Amazon. I think it was Tesco as well too. His name is Sean. I forget his last name at the moment, but he shared a really great story about how they were ramping up an experiment, and the results they got were just totally confounding. Like they didn't understand until they looked at it and they said, "Oh wow, we ramped up and that destroyed our data quality because we now had it biased towards returning users." And it was really just like an eye-opening experience as to why people should not ramp up. And I'm on Jonas's like team always, but like some
people ramp up but then discard the data. I think the problem is including and mixing in those averages in that data across multiple traffic levels. That's where the problem creeps in. So if someone could in theory ramp up but then say, I'm not going to include the ramp up period in the data, I'm going to wait until it's got to 50-50 and then take the data from there. So but yeah, that can be a common mistake. People will mix all that data together and it'll just give them a terrible result.
And you're also causing more work for yourself too, because then you have to exclude the data and you have to do some more work and do data science and blah, blah, blah. So like, I don't know, just like 50-50 if you can, if it makes sense. Thoughts, questions? Anybody else? I see there's like 2 more things in the.
They were just sharing your slides and everybody's saying awesome. This was so wonderful, Erin. Such a great job. I want to remind everybody that there's going to be a first time ever TLC live panel at Super Week. It's going to be streamed. We're going to be talking about engineering the future with Simo, Jen Koons, Rick Dronkers, and Kat Rabant. You can catch the live stream at I'm real bad with European times, so forgive me. 1540 CET, 1440 GMT, 940 AM Eastern, 840 AM Central. If you want to get up real early 740 AM Mountain, 640 AM Pacific, the link to catch the Super Week TV is on the TLC website. The next I'm sorry, and that is Wednesday, the 31st. So this coming Wednesday. Which means if you haven't figured that out, as soon as I get off this call, I've got to pack because I'm getting on a plane tomorrow morning with Tone. Tone's going to meet me there. And then the next talk after that is SEO testing with Will Critchlow on February 9th. And then we're going to be inviting Carl Gillis. He's going to be joining us. If you haven't seen Carl talk, it's really, really fun. He's going to be
fantastic. I love Carl.
Oh my gosh, it's so fun. He's going to be telling us why we shouldn't be testing things, the role of UX in CRO on March 15th. And then Daphne is going to be joining us. So why experimentation is like making lemonade. So see you all soon. Thank you so much, Erin. Take care.
Fun Super Week.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.
See you
All
soon.
your little square pixels, everybody. Come say hi. Bye.
Thank you, Erin.
Thank you. Bye. It's nice to see
Bye-bye.
you.
Bye, everyone.